All right. I've got her, and we're really excited that we do, because who would you want to talk to as we circle the drain more than one of the smartest people I know, Dahlia Lithwick. Hi, great to see you.
Hi, Pete. What a fun coup we're having.
This is what are we calling this? Is it a billionaire grift? Is it a coup? Is it an authoritarian takeover? Is it a constitutional crisis? Terminology seems to matter.
Mark Joseph Stern and I are just this, as we speak, filing a piece calling it an auto coup, which has that fancy Spanish name that I can't pronounce. I think it's a self coup closer to, it's also, this is what a corporate takeover, right? This is exactly how a corporate takeover happens. So if you think of it in that context, maybe that helps. But I think formally speaking, and this is actually important, and your friend Eric Siegel, I think, would have my back on this. A constitutional crisis has a really, as a term of art, has a really formal definition, which is when two entities that are supposed to be checking and balancing each other are at a logjam, right? So when the court says no and the president does it anyway, or Congress says no and the president does, that's actually a constitutional crisis. That's like sending the National Guard out to Brown v. Board, right? So this feels like it's not exactly that because the president seems to have the Congress at least backing him up. I think actually in the next 24 hours or so, as courts start to enjoin the stuff that's happening on Capitol Hill right now, I think that actually will tilt into a constitutional crisis when you have courts that are saying, no, you can't do this. And we've already got courts on last week saying all of that nonsense with the impoundment is unlawful. I think then it's a constitutional crisis. I think up until now, it's been some version of a self coup where some strongman gets into power and then hollows out checks and balances from within.
When the courts enjoin, mean to stop whatever action that the executive branch or Trump is taking by executive order. That's what I think that means. But the most obvious thing to me seemed, and you wrote about this, Trump's birthright citizenship, executive order. A court stopped that, at least temporarily. But if you don't know what a corporate takeover is or a constitutional crisis is, you do know just about the 14th Amendment, the Constitution, and birthright citizenship. Most people at least do know. And he just inviolated. He just said no more. To me, starting there, much less going to whether or not Congress has the power of the purse, but just how can these things happen and why do they happen and how much chaos does that create?
They happen when you have a president who genuinely believes, and we can thank John Roberts and the Supreme Court because they bolstered this belief that he is above the law, right? This is a president who genuinely believes that the Congress and the courts are subordinate to him and that the Constitution means what he says it means, Pete. And so even though the 14th Amendment expressly protects birthright citizenship by design, right? If you're an originalist, you know that this is what it was meant to do. So to say, oh, actually, we've been getting it wrong this whole time, and I just choose to like take my Sharpie and strike through it like it's a line item veto. Yes, that is the function of a president who genuinely believes. And by the way, everything that we are seeing at OPM, everything that we are seeing right now at the Treasury, what's happening with Elon Musk's little musketeers is his little 20-year-old
There's like six guys, but they've identified their names. They're young guys. Yeah, go ahead.
Silicon Valley babies, like high school graduates. And if you think about that, every one of them is also operating in violation of a statute or a rule so I think the idea simply is we're going to just break all the rules until someone stops us. Right? That's what the birthright citizenship order is. And as you say, a judge has stopped them, a Reagan judge. The first week out was like, no, and if they go ahead, there was a 30-day period before they were going to start denying birthright citizenship. If they go ahead and do it, you're exactly right. We are in a constitutional crisis.
You mentioned Eric Siegel. I told him that I was going to talk to you, and he texted me, "Awesome, say hi to me." And I asked him for a question. Pop it. He said, "Say hi for me," and then a bunch of other things that he wanted to say to me. I'm like, "No, I'm not going to say all those things." Then he writes, I ask her, I think the immunity opinion, which no one saw coming, is because John Roberts is afraid of Donald Trump. Do you have a better explanation at all for that? Why he decided on that decision?
So I am in the basket of people that includes Eric, that was surprised by the immunity decision,
Yeah.
because not only did they, for the first time ever in history, grant the president immunity from criminal acts, they did it in the most maximalist way, right? There were ways, and Amy Coney Barrett wrote a concurrence that suggested one way that they could have narrowed this, but John Roberts was like, swing for the fences, Mr. President, whatever you say, with very few constraints. And so I think there's a couple of theories about why. I think my best theory is, if you like drain all the blood out of the entire conflict and just look at it as a question of John Roberts is a person who always had a really capacious view of executive power, right? The president, he's been writing stuff like that for decades and he believes it. And so does the conservative legal movement. You can make a quasi plausible argument that this was just like John Roberts' dream come true, right? To have this unbelievably broad swath of powers that you confer on the executive. And I think that's the kind of, if you want to do bloodless doctrine, I think that's the defense. It's hard to see, even if you want to do broad executive powers, why you would immunize the president
Right.
from committing acts under some like complete crackpot theory that you don't want him to be too scared to do his job. Right? You don't want to chill him from acting boldly. This guy. So I guess Eric's theory, which is that he's afraid of something in Donald Trump, is as plausible as the next theory. I genuinely believe that they, and I don't know how, I was the person, Pete, saying, and I may have even said it on your show a year ago, I genuinely did not think that John Roberts was a big fan of Donald Trump. I don't think that Amy Coney Barrett is a big fan. I don't think they're big fans of coups and of lawlessness. But I guess I just think they may not have anticipated that this was going to be Viktor Orban's Hungary playbook. And I'm not sure they saw it coming. I think it might be less afraid of Donald Trump and more like, y'all need to get out more.
The reason why that question I feel like is relevant is because all of you scholars and smart people who are often very right about the analysis, the arguments, when you hear them, this is going to continue to come up. Where will the Supreme Court decide on all of these challenges? Will they all reach the Supreme Court, from birthright citizenship to whether or not Congress has the power of the purse, or whether or not you could just shut down USAID unilaterally? Do all those things end up at the Supreme Court? And do we find ourselves with the same makeup basically as we did on immunity?
And I think you're asking what I think is like structurally one of the most important questions that hasn't gotten a lot of airtime, which is, there's no way that the Supreme Court, as it is currently constituted, right, that hears like a couple dozen cases a year, can possibly hear every single executive order, of which there are dozens already, right? So one of the just structural problems is, when you kick up this much mayhem, the court actually can't hear every one of these cases. And that may be good, may be bad, because if the court is going to rubber stamp everything Trump does, maybe it's good that some of them like die out in the appeals courts.
But I was going to say, but the lower courts can, the appeals courts can, so they could stop them, and then they might not then make it to the Supreme Court. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Or they make it next year, or it's just the court used to hear like 180 cases a year, and now they barely hear 70. So it's hard to imagine, when you've got literally every day 6 orders coming out, how they're going to do it. On your other question of what is the court going to do, I think I want to say 2 things, and one of them is a bit meta, so I'll save it for the second. The first thing is, I think that, having just said that John Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett they're not nihilists, right? I don't think they are Sam Alito and Clarence Thomas. I don't think they have Neil Gorsuch's like fundamental like desire to drown all of federal government in the bathtub. I think they're more, it breaks my heart to say that these are the center of the court, because they're radical right-wing operatives who were put on the court by the conservative legal movement. But I think it's fair to say there are probably not 5 votes for birthright citizenship, to do away with birthright citizenship. There are probably not 5 votes to say that centuries of doctrine on impoundment, right? The president's saying, I don't care if Congress controls the purse strings. I don't care if Congress appropriated funds. Like, I'm the big boy, and like, we're turning off the spigot. I don't think there are 5 votes for that. So I don't know that all of this, like the worst nihilist damaging stuff, is going to get 5 votes at the court. But the second thing, and this is almost more important, and I really want to say it because I've been thinking it all weekend. In most authoritarian takeovers, and we see this in Hungary, we see this in Turkey. I had an amazing expert, Kim Lane Shepley, on my podcast Amicus on the weekend, and she makes the point that in almost all of those takeovers, you get elected once reasonably fairly, which is what happened, and then you hollow out the courts, right? Then you destroy the courts, then you destroy Congress, then you destroy the media. That's the play. We're in a weird posture, Pete, because the court, in some sense, was already taken over, right? The court was taken over when it decided Citizens United, when it decided Shelby County, when it hollowed out voting in America. In some sense, the court...
Before Trump's first term, the court was already captured by right-wing interests, Federalist Society, et cetera. And yeah.
And so this is a decades-long project that kind of culminates where you began, which is that the court then gives Trump the presidency, right? They slow walk the immunity decision and then they immunize him. So it's not possible to hear the case before the election. So I think it's really always going to be useful as we sit here saying, oh, maybe the court will save us. Maybe the court's going to like buff off the worst edges of this, to really remember the court created this. The court gave us Donald Trump. And here's the last thing I'll say, but it's really important. Remember, there were 3 iterations of the travel ban, right? The travel ban, 2.0, 3.0, the 3.0. The court... The Muslim ban in 2017.
Yeah.
So the court sometimes serves to burnish something that is lawless, right? And then the country looks around and says, if the Supreme Court said that third Muslim ban is constitutional, I guess it's constitutional. So watch for falling into the trap of saying that a captured court is going to save us. The captured court created this in the first instance. And if and when, and this is what really I have been thinking about all weekend, if and when the US Supreme Court blesses some version of Donald Trump's birthright citizenship argument, blesses some in the 4.0 iteration, when they're like, okay, we're going to just say that only this class of children born in the United States to non-American parents have to self-deport, be really careful of saying that's constitutional because the court said it was.
Very important point. I really appreciate you explaining that because it's so important. So as you look at this, it's different than how most of us look at it because you're an expert in many ways on what government can do legally and so on. And you're as exasperated and as connected to this emotionally as anybody else as well. And I wonder how you think about what is being done and what can be done, whether it be around the confirmation hearings. It seems like everybody I've heard talk about this that I respect says there's really not a lot Democrats can do because they don't have majorities in the House or Senate. There's not a lot they can do to slow these things down, much less lead investigations. Are you seeing anything that Democrats can do outside of stand outside in front of AID and start screaming and trying to compel people to care and get out in the streets or whatever, boycott this or that, which I don't see happening?
So I think you're asking 2 slightly different questions. One is, what can Americans do about the court? And I think the answer to that question is like invent a DeLorean, go back to the first term, the first Biden, when we could go back and actually do something, right? I think we're cooked. As far as I'm concerned, like for the foreseeable future, this is the court that we live with. And it is a court that is both emboldened because it thinks it's right, and it is pissed off and angry because we keep trying to figure out who's paying for Samuel Alito's fishing trips and Clarence Thomas's
right. We know, don't we?
Luxury camper. So they're mad. So I don't think the courts, as I said, are going to be fixed anytime soon. And I think the thing we have to do about that is be really not credulous, is to be incredibly principled about watching what they're doing and not falling for the kind of balls and strikes, we're gods in black robes bullshit. That's what we do about the court, as best as I can tell, is just stop saying they're like 9 oracles because they wear robes.
Right.
What Americans can do about what's going on now is, listen, everybody I know is on fire trying to figure that out. And I think we can agree that congressional Democrats have taken a long time to figure out how to meet the moment, and putting out tweets that are like, impoundment is unconstitutional is not, like, describing the problem in a tweet is not in fact taking action. Right. So I think it is heartening Monday morning to see a lot more happening there. There are also tons of lawsuits being filed as we speak, right, on all of these issues by amazing people who are saying, like, no, you can't like illegally fire half of the Justice Department. There are statutes that protect career officials from being summarily dismissed. So lawsuits are happening. Here's the thing, and I'm just going to absolutely parrot what Professor Shepley from Princeton told me. And as I said, she has lived through this in Hungary and documented it. What she said is that our job is to create friction. Our job is to throw sand in every gear we can throw sand in. And if that means like standing in front of the Treasury, then that's what it means. If it means refusing when they fire you and say, leave the building, saying no, like you can't make me go. It
Right.
means, I hate to say it, talking to reporters like you and me. We're conferring like lots of anonymity, but like talking to reporters so that we can understand what's going on and what the stakes are. But it's just friction. We know that as Poland has tried to claw back from autocracy, what's making the difference is people putting their bodies in it. And this is the Tim Snyder stuff. And people, if you haven't read Tim Snyder and Ruth Ben-Ghiat and Rebecca Solnit, like there are playbooks for what you do. But I think the operative theory is don't be passive. Don't say it's all too much, I'm going to Target. And don't say there is like some big brain who's doing this so I don't have to. The big brains are freaking out. Take my word for it.
Yeah, we've got to go. I've almost got to go because I've got to get to Target. But what are the organizations that would you mention the organizations that are filing these lawsuits? I think I know a couple, but another good thing you could do, I feel like, is donate to these organizations. Require a lot of lawyers and more apparently experts to file these lawsuits, right?
Yes. So the things that I am directing people to do are twofold. One is read and listen to good independent journalism like this show, like Slate, if you would, like the Amicus podcast. Listen to what the folks are doing at the Bulwark and the Contrarian and Publica and Talking Points Memo and the Center for Investigative Reporting and Public Notice, right? There's so much good independent journalism. So if you canceled your subscription to the Washington Post or the LA Times or the New York Times in fury, that's fine. But it means you have to subscribe to other things and you have to read them. And so that's one thing that I think is essential, that we need an information ecosystem that we can trust again.
Yes.
In terms of supporting organizations, and I'm not going to get all of them, please don't be angry. I think the single most important thing you can be doing is volunteering and signing up to help with groups like Protect Democracy, Lawyers for Good Government, Code for America, U.S. Digital Response, Partnership for Public Service. We're seeing so many, the ACLU is doing fantastic work. So I think that what I really want to tell people is, and this is like another lesson we have from Poland, is find something local. Your food bank is in
Yes.
crisis. Your library is in crisis. If people who depend on government for federal grants, they're in crisis. Universities in crisis, right? So a lot of this is going to be local. A lot of this is going to be find things to do.
Yep, most important thing I've done is the school board stuff, and everybody's got a school board. So show up, write letters. There's not many people that show up. Sometimes there's nobody that shows up. Show up, write letters, make your voice heard at the school board.
100% local. And at the same time, like just knowing that there are so many projects that have been preparing this for years and years and who are showing up on a large scale just because they're invisible to us. Sign up for one of them and get their newsletters, and whatever they say is useful, do. I think like you just have to remember, and this is, I would end here, where Steve Bannon is like flood the zone with shit. Like we're in that, right? That's all this is. It's 1,000 things and nothing is more important or less important. It's all urgent and it's not our job to do everything, but it's absolutely our job to do something.
Love it. Thank you for all the ideas. I'll put all those in the show notes, both the journalistic outfits and the nonprofits. You can find them in the show notes, the links to all them. You're the greatest. I so appreciate you talking to me. Thank you very much. Keep up the great work, Dahlia.
Back at you, Pete. Thank you.
Gotta get to Target.
Target for everyone. I have to stop